For years, Val Kilmer denied the rumors. Then his voice disappeared. Now, his daughter is telling the truth, and it changes everything you thought you knew.
Okay.
A Hollywood upbringing like no other. Mercedes Kilmer was born in 1991 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Her parents, Val Kilmer and Joanne Whalley, were both well-known actors at the time. Val had just wrapped The Doors. Joanne had starred in Willow. They were Hollywood royalty, and Mercedes came into the world right in the middle of it. But unlike most celebrity kids, Mercedes didn't grow up in front of flashing cameras. Her parents divorced when she was just a toddler. Val raised her and her brother Jack mostly in Los Angeles, far from the red carpet. No wild parties, no fancy events, just a quiet house full of books, art, and strange furniture. Val liked to collect odd things, and their home reflected that. It wasn't your typical movie star mansion. Mercedes said in a 2020 interview that their dad didn't act like other actors. He didn't brag about being famous. He didn't talk about the big roles. What he did do was create nonstop. He painted, filmed random moments, made short videos on old cameras, and scribbled poems everywhere. He'd drag the kids into scenes, hand them props, and say, "Go." He also kept them out of the spotlight. While most celebrity kids were landing magazine covers, Mercedes wasn't even allowed to have a social media account until she was much older. Val was strict about privacy. He said public life was dangerous for kids, especially ones with his last name. Still, she knew her dad wasn't like the others. He had a way of showing up to parent-teacher night in full costume. Once, he arrived wearing a Sherlock Holmes cape, smoking a fake pipe. No one said a word. They all just let Val be Val. She didn't understand how famous he really was until much later. Fans would ask for photos or bring up Top Gun while she stood there holding his hand. She didn't get it. To her, he was just the guy who told stories at dinner and insisted they speak with perfect diction. That strange, private world shaped who Mercedes became. She wasn't raised to chase fame. She was raised by a man who lived in his own head and made room for her in it. The rumors began to spread. By the early 2010s, something seemed off. Val Kilmer, once known for his bold voice and sharp looks, started vanishing from public view. He skipped red carpets. He canceled appearances. When he did show up, he looked thinner. Fans noticed his voice sounded different. And the whispers started. Tabloids ran wild. Some claimed he was broke. Others said he was seriously ill. Val didn't say much. He'd pop up in a photo, looking pale or gaunt, then disappear again. Paparazzi caught him leaving a hospital in 2015 with a scarf over his neck. Rumors of cancer exploded online. People magazine reported he was rushed to the hospital for bleeding from the throat. He denied it at the time. On Facebook, he told fans he had no tumor and that he was just recovering from a procedure. He wrote, "I have not had a tumor or a tumor operation or any operation. I had a complication where the best way to receive care was to stay under the watchful eye of the UCLA ICU." The more he denied it, the louder the talk got. Even actor Michael Douglas, who had his own cancer battle, told the press Val had the same disease. Douglas later apologized, but the damage was done. The public was sure Val was hiding something. All this time, Mercedes said nothing. She stayed completely silent in the press. She was in her early 20s then, starting her own career in theater and small film roles. But behind the scenes, she was watching it all. Her father's condition was real, even if he wouldn't admit it to the world yet. In 2016, Val finally admitted he had a healing of cancer. That was his exact phrase, not a diagnosis, not remission, just healing. It was cryptic, but it confirmed what everyone suspected. Still, the full truth wouldn't come out for a few more years. Mercedes wasn't ready to speak, and Val wasn't either. But from this point on, the public stopped asking if something was wrong. Now they were asking how bad it really was. Val's voice disappears overnight. By 2017, Val Kilmer's voice had changed so much that it was impossible to ignore. He sounded hoarse, raspy, and weak. In some interviews, he barely got words out at all. Fans who remembered the booming voice from Top Gun or The Doors were stunned. The truth was finally confirmed that year. Val had undergone a tracheostomy, a surgical procedure that removed part of his throat and left him speaking through a tube. His voice was permanently damaged. Eating and breathing were difficult. He couldn't speak more than a few words at a time without help. In a rare interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Val said, "I feel a lot better than I sound." It was the first time he truly admitted what had happened. He had throat cancer. He'd been fighting it for 2 years. Surgery and chemotherapy had left him physically weakened, but mentally, he said he was still sharp. Mercedes never gave an official statement at the time, but she started appearing with him more. They were seen together at events, sometimes holding hands. She stood beside him during photo ops and spoke when he couldn't. She quietly became his public voice. Back home, things were harder. Val had trouble swallowing. Meals took a long time. He needed help with daily routines. Mercedes later said in interviews that it was heartbreaking to see her father, who once delivered monologues with ease, struggle just to say a sentence. Still, he refused to let go of acting. He practiced breathing exercises. He worked with voice coaches. He recorded audio with a mechanical device to try to regain some kind of rhythm. It didn't sound like him, but he kept trying anyway. People close to the family said he never complained. He didn't want pity, he wanted to work. By the end of 2017, it was clear Val wouldn't recover his voice, but he wasn't backing out of the spotlight either. And Mercedes, though still quiet publicly, had stepped fully into a new role, not just as a daughter, but as his silent partner. They weren't done yet. Mercedes steps in on stage. In 2020, Val Kilmer made his official return to acting. The project was a low-budget crime film called Pay Dirt, directed by Christian Sesma. What made it different? He wasn't alone. Mercedes played his daughter on screen too. It was their first film together, and it wasn't easy. By then, Val had already lost most of his voice. He spoke with a voice box, or not at all. The role was written around that. His character had survived a throat injury and now communicated through short, croaky phrases. The director adjusted the script to fit what Val could physically handle. Behind the scenes, Mercedes helped bridge the gap. She worked closely with the director and crew to make sure her father's needs were met. She helped manage his energy, kept him comfortable on set, and even stepped in to interpret when he couldn't get words out clearly. During filming, the crew saw how close they were. Val was fragile, but determined. Mercedes was calm and steady. There were no complaints, just focus. In interviews promoting the film, Mercedes admitted it was emotional. Watching her dad perform again brought back memories of seeing him on stage years ago. "He's still got it," she said in one segment. "He's just doing it differently now." Her performance in Pay Dirt wasn't flashy, but it was honest. You could feel the real connection between them. It wasn't just acting. It was a daughter holding space for her father's return. The film didn't get a huge release. Reviews were mixed, but for the Kilmers, that didn't matter. It was a milestone. Val proved he could still be in front of a camera. And Mercedes proved she could stand beside him, not just as support, but as a serious actress in her own right. For viewers, Pay Dirt offered more than a plot. It showed what resilience looked like. And it showed a father and daughter finding a way to keep going together in frame. She breaks her silence publicly. Up until 2020, Mercedes Kilmer hadn't said much about her dad's illness. She made quiet appearances. She helped on set, but she kept her thoughts private. That changed when the documentary Val went into promotion. During press interviews for Val, Mercedes confirmed her father's cancer battle for the first time. She didn't offer drama, only clarity. In one interview, she said he'd been through a lot, but he was still present and creating. That quiet confirmation ended years of speculation. The documentary had just premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. Critics called it one of the most intimate portraits of a celebrity ever made. Most of the footage came from Val's personal archive, but he'd filmed everything over the years. Childhood birthdays, movie sets, even hospital stays. Mercedes helped shape how that footage got used. She also did voiceover for the film, along with her brother Jack. Mercedes didn't just narrate scenes, she filled in gaps her dad couldn't. When Val's voice failed, hers stepped in. Viewers heard her reflect on the hardest parts of his illness. She spoke gently but plainly, no sugarcoating. In a 2021 NPR interview, she described the experience as emotional and healing. She said the vulnerability in the footage was hard to watch, but it was also part of what made the film meaningful. She also admitted it took time to accept what was happening. Her dad had always been strong and loud. Suddenly, he wasn't. That shift changed their dynamic. She became the one doing the speaking. At events, on camera, in interviews, not for attention, but because someone had to. For fans, hearing her speak was a turning point. It confirmed what the rumors had only hinted at. Val Kilmer had cancer. He'd lost his voice, but he hadn't lost himself. And his daughter wasn't just backing him up, she was leading the conversation now. From this point forward, Mercedes became a steady public presence. Not often, not loudly, but when she spoke, people listened. And she made one thing clear. Her dad wasn't a tragedy. He was a survivor. Inside the Val documentary moments. When Val premiered in 2021, it stunned audiences. This wasn't a career highlight reel. It was a raw, personal look at Val Kilmer's life, told almost entirely through footage he'd filmed himself over 40 years, home movies, on-set clips, private hospital scenes. Nothing was staged. Mercedes helped shape the final cut. Alongside her brother Jack, she worked closely with directors Leo Scott and Ting Pu to organize the footage. Val couldn't narrate it himself, so Jack read his words. Mercedes added context when needed, guiding viewers through the more emotional turns. One moment in the documentary showed Val recovering at home, visibly weakened but still trying to smile. Mercedes appeared nearby in several clips, quiet, supportive, and present. There was no dialogue. Just silence, stillness, and a sense of what they'd been through together. In another clip, Val revisited old acting tapes. He paused on a scene from The Doors and tried to mouth the lines. His voice was gone, but his eyes still had the same fire. Mercedes watched beside him. She didn't interrupt, she just let it happen. The documentary also revealed how much footage Val had saved, thousands of hours. Mercedes called it a mountain of memories. She said going through it felt like time traveling through her own childhood. Moments she forgot were suddenly alive again. Birthday parties, school plays, even fights. She said some of it was hard to watch, not just because of his illness, but because her father had always been larger than life. Seeing him vulnerable wasn't easy, but she also saw strength in those moments. He never stopped creating. Even when he couldn't speak, he filmed, he edited, he planned new projects. Val wasn't just about a movie star. It was about a man holding onto his voice, even when it failed him physically. And it was about a daughter helping him tell that story right. Caring for a silent legend. After Val came out, fans saw the full picture. Val Kilmer hadn't just survived cancer. He was learning how to live with what it left behind. That meant new routines, new ways of speaking, and a lot of daily adjustments. At the center of it all was Mercedes. She became more than a daughter. She was a caretaker, a creative partner, and often his voice in public settings. In interviews, she described their home life honestly. Val couldn't eat solid food without effort. He relied on a feeding tube. Talking required a mechanical device or handwriting. It took patience. Mercedes didn't treat it like a burden. She called it a new kind of closeness. She said, "We talk all the time, just differently now." Mercedes helped with appointments, arranged interviews, and managed the travel details when Val was invited to screenings and press events. At public Q&As, she often stood close by, making sure he was comfortable before he went on stage. When he needed support, she was always the one quietly guiding from just out of frame. At home, their communication was simple. Hand signals, writing pads, eye contact. Mercedes said they had their own rhythm, something developed over time that worked for them. She joked that he still found ways to boss her around, even without words. But there were limits. Val tired easily. He'd get winded after walking just a few steps. Mercedes made sure those around him understood this. She wasn't there to manage him. She was there to make sure people treated him with respect. Friends of the family said she kept things light, jokes, music, old movie nights. Val stayed sharp and opinionated, and Mercedes never treated him like a patient, just her dad. Clearing the tabloid myths. Once Val's condition became public, the internet filled in the blanks badly. Some articles claimed he was broke, others said he was bedridden or living in isolation. A few suggested he'd refused medical treatment altogether. Most of it wasn't true. Mercedes finally addressed the noise. In interviews from 2021 and 2022, she called out the press for making things worse. She said her dad wasn't helpless. He wasn't hiding. He just didn't feel the need to explain himself to strangers. One big myth was that he'd rejected all treatment. The truth was more complicated. Val did delay traditional cancer care at first. He was a lifelong Christian Scientist. That belief shaped how he approached healing. But eventually he chose surgery and radiation. Mercedes confirmed that herself. He took the steps he needed, she said, and we supported that. Another rumor claimed he was out of money. In reality, Val had sold some property to downsize, but he wasn't struggling. He'd invested in land in New Mexico years earlier and still had film royalties coming in. Mercedes said their family wasn't rich, but they weren't desperate either. As for the idea that he'd been abandoned by Hollywood, she pushed back on that too. Val had stepped away by choice. He wasn't blacklisted. He just couldn't take on demanding roles anymore. And when he did appear, like in Pay Dirt or Top Gun Maverick, it was on his terms. One thing Mercedes made clear, her dad wasn't a sad story. He was stubborn, creative, and still full of ideas. He spent his days painting, writing, and filming short projects with friends. She said he had a million unfinished things he still wanted to do. Their bond through art and film. After Val, Mercedes, and her father kept creating, just not the way most people expected. He couldn't speak like before, but that didn't stop him. Art became their new shared language. Mercedes once said that growing up, their house felt like a live set. Cameras were always rolling. That energy didn't disappear after his diagnosis. If anything, it got stronger. Val filmed short pieces around the house using old equipment. Sometimes there was no script, but gestures, images, and mood. Mercedes helped frame shots, edited clips, and even acted in a few. They also painted together. Val had taken up painting full-time after losing his voice. His work was colorful, abstract, sometimes chaotic. He held solo exhibits. Mercedes helped organize and promote them quietly, mostly online. One show in Los Angeles sold out in hours. Some featured abstract visuals, handwritten text, or archival clips. Mercedes supported these releases but rarely commented on them publicly. Fans responded well to the style. Art was how they processed everything. Illness, recovery, aging. It all ended up on canvas or tape. Val once scribbled a note to Mercedes that read, "Don't just film the good parts, film the whole thing." She took that to heart. She also shared how their creative bond helped her grow. Working with him gave her confidence to direct, to write, and to experiment without fear of failure. She said it didn't matter if something didn't work. What mattered was that they made it. The real truth she revealed. By 2023, Mercedes wasn't just known as Val Kilmer's daughter. She was known as the one person who consistently told the truth about what he was facing. She skipped the drama and told the truth. Calm, clear, and careful every time. In later interviews, she said her dad didn't need a loud voice to make an impact. Even in silence, he had presence. That never changed. He still gave direction, still shared ideas, still filled a room without saying much at all. She also said he never once asked, "Why me?" That wasn't how he thought. Even when he was in pain or frustrated, he stayed focused on what he could do. Paint, write, sketch, plan, film. She said he was obsessed with making stuff, even if he couldn't say much out loud. Mercedes made it clear he hadn't given up. He still made goals, still dreamed big. Some days were better than others, but he always got up, always got dressed, and always had a project in mind. What hurt most, she said, wasn't the illness. It was how people started treating him like he was already gone. By speaking up, Mercedes changed that. She gave people a new image to hold on to, not of a fading movie star, but of a man who adjusted, adapted, and kept going. And of a daughter who stood next to him through all of it, without needing attention or credit. She also talked about legacy, but not in the Hollywood sense. She said, "The stuff people remember my dad for, the roles, the lines, that's great. But the real legacy is that he stayed himself, even when it got hard." Val Kilmer passed away on the 1st of April, 2025, at the age of 65. The family kept the details private, just as he'd lived in his final years, quietly, on his own terms, surrounded by art and family. Mercedes didn't give a long statement. She didn't need to. Everything she'd shared in the years leading up to his death already said it all.